Alright guys, it's that time for the sunscreen empties. Now last week I shared with you guys my skincare empties, all of the skincare products that I finished up throughout the fall months, but sunscreen gets its own separate dedicated video because it's such an important subject near and dear to my heart, and I always love talking about the sunscreens I managed to finish because honestly I try out and test out a lot. Speaking of which, get excited, I am preparing behind the scenes for a video for you guys in 2025 of clear, colorless sunscreen gels. More than you would ever imagine exist out there that we have never talked about. Many are newly released. Get excited, okay? Make sure you have the bell notifications on, that way you don't miss this video, okay? Because we're gonna get to it and then it'll be spring break time and you'll be scrambling. All right, this past season I made my way through some favorites and I discovered some new sunscreens that did not disappoint. Here's one that I finished up towards the beginning of fall because I relied on it quite a bit actually in the summer months, and I always do. It's La Roche-Posay's On Thelo's Melton Sunscreen Milk. Now they make this formula in a SPF 100 and an SPF 60. Honestly, SPF 100 technically is not much different than SPF 60, like it's sort of splitting hairs. However, in the real world, based on how people apply sunscreen, SPF 100 tends to be better at protecting against a burn because of the thin way in which sunscreen is applied. You end up getting somewhere along the lines of like an SPF 50, for example. So higher ends up being better. I like a sunscreen, especially in the humid, hot months, which honestly fall here is still very warm. Like Halloween is not anything that you want to be going out with a coat on because you will boil. So I continue to use this, and it's a chemical sunscreen, so there's no white cast with it. I love wearing it both on my face and on my body. I find it's moisturizing while also being non-greasy, fast drying. It doesn't make you look overly shiny. It's water resistant up to 80 minutes, so it's excellent for humidity. I keep recommending this over and over again. In my opinion, this is La Roche-Posay's one of their best sunscreens. It offers really good broad spectrum protection. It's fragrance free. It feels moisturizing, like it doesn't leave the skin feeling dry, so it adds some nice lubrication to the skin surface. It's a really good option if you are active outdoors, you participate in sport. Now, if you're someone who does winter sports with snow on the slopes, for example, make sure you are protecting your skin from the sun with a sunscreen, whatever skin is exposed, I should say, because you don't need to wear sunscreen underneath like your ski pants, for example. But ultraviolet radiation exposure is quite intense while skiing because you're at altitude, not to mention the fact that snow reflects the sun's ultraviolet rays onto the skin, intensifies things. You can easily get a very bad sunburn, a lot of sun damage, sun exposure. So make sure you're protecting your skin and your lips, which make sure you watch to the end of the video because I'll talk about the SPF lip balm I finished up. This would be an excellent option. And what I like also about it, because it's water resistant, it doesn't like seep into your eyes when you are getting really sweaty. But that being said, I'm able to use it around my eyes without getting that burning, blurry eye issue that can happen with some chemical sunscreens. Highly recommend this. It's pretty good. This is probably like my 4th or 5th bottle of this. Now this year I tried some products from the brand Minimalist, and honestly they have not disappointed. Like for example, their tranexamic acid serum, and if you caught last week's skincare empties video, I talked all about the Cepacol moisturizer I finished up. But you'll recall I did a review of their sunscreens, and let me tell you, this invisible sunscreen SPF 40 has to be one of my favorite new sunscreen discoveries of this year. I didn't much care for their other sunscreen per se, but this one I loved and didn't want to stop using it. I definitely think I will repurchase it in the future. It's a chemical sunscreen. It has avobenzone, Uvinol A+, Parsol 340, and Usilex. It also has this tomato fruit extract that's sort of one of its like featured ingredients. Tomato fruit extract may have anti-inflammatory compounds, antioxidants, and it has squalane, which is an emollient that feels nice and lightweight in comparison to other oily ingredients. Now, what I like most about this formula is just the overall consistency. It's a clear, colorless sunscreen. It goes on and has a pore blurring effect. Sort of reminds me of Supergoop's Unseen, but a lot less oily in feel, texture, easy to tolerate around delicate eyelid skin, loved it on my neck. It's really good at not only protecting the skin from ultraviolet radiation by virtue of the filters, but it's also a good skin protectant for reducing water loss and limiting the penetration of irritants, aeroallergens. We think about sunscreen for its primary purpose, which is protecting us from ultraviolet radiation. But one advantage to using a sunscreen is that it's in a moisturizing base. So it's going to help keep your skin moisturized throughout the day as well, reducing water loss, limiting penetration of aeroallergens, irritants, etc. And there's some idea that sunscreens or moisturizers, by providing some sort of barrier, may limit access, penetration, if you will, of pollutants. There's a pretty strong association with pollution and certain inflammatory skin conditions like acne and atopic dermatitis. It's not the best for our skin health, and so things that can limit penetration of particulate matter into the skin help limit that lipid peroxidation that can prematurely damage our skin. Really like that one. Definitely would repurchase. APLB is a Korean brand that I discovered this year, and honestly have liked everything. Well, at least everything I've tried so far has been in this glutathione niacinamide line. I initially discovered their lotion, fell in love with that, and if you caught last week's skincare empties video, you can hear the review on that. I really liked it a lot. And then I was like, well, I just have to try their sunscreen because it's fragrance free, and it's got glutathione and niacinamide, which are ingredients in sunscreens I really like to have there because they're anti-inflammatory. They may help defend to a certain extent against free radicals that prematurely damage the skin, and they may also help to reduce inflammatory cascades that signal to the pigment producing cells to make more pigment aberrantly and lead to hyperpigmentation, dark spots. Also very soothing and anti-inflammatory. It has octinoxate, octocrylene, tinosorb S, and avobenzone as the active sunscreen ingredients. It also has compounds from centella, which are very soothing. This is a nice lightweight consistency. Many Korean sunscreens that I have tried and fallen in love with have a very similar consistency. Easy around the eyes, very hydrating, very moisturizing, but pretty lightweight overall. It's SPF 50 and it is rated as a PA 4+, which reflects the UVA protection. Sunscreens in the US don't rate the UVA rating. It's more on a pass-fail system here. The PA rating is kind of nice to have, but it's not a perfect system. It has its issues, so keep that in mind. Speaking of Korean sunscreens, this is another SPF 50 PA 4+ Korean sunscreen I've talked about before. I think this is probably my third or fourth tube I've finished of this over the years. I discovered it, I want to say back in 2023. As a matter of fact, I think initially I got it in one of those amazing Korean advent calendars. It's Ionix Centella Calming Daily Sunscreen. So again, this has compounds from centella, which are anti-inflammatory and soothing. It also has niacinamide, which, as a reminder, is a really good ingredient for not only the moisture barrier and combating oxidative stress, but for hyperpigmentation, because it limits the spread of pigment packets from the pigment-producing cells and melanocytes to neighboring keratinocytes. Plus, it's an antioxidant, it's anti-inflammatory, so it can help put the brakes on some of those inflammatory cascades that signal to the melanocytes to upregulate pigment production aberrantly. Now, in contrast to the APLB Korean sunscreen, this one is a lot thicker. It's a richer cream. This is one for those of you who have dry skin. It is much thicker, a little heavier in consistency, although honestly it's still pretty lightweight, especially once it's all rubbed in and on the skin surface. As you're applying it though, you will notice it is much thicker in consistency compared to many other Korean sunscreens, but I honestly think that makes it a great option for the colder months when our skin is a lot more vulnerable to dryness because the ambient humidity drops, we have the heaters on, you may be indoors where the humidity is not so great, spending more time indoors, and the skin is just a lot more prone to dryness. Having a really moisturizing sunscreen is a great option for the winter months. And then last but not least is from CeraVe. Their AM facial moisturizing lotion, which you're like, yeah, you've used that before for sure. Back in 2016, 2017, I was using CeraVe AM quite a bit back then, but I saw they came out with an SPF 50 version of the AM facial moisturizing lotion. Now, like the SPF 30 version, this is a hybrid sunscreen. In contrast to these other sunscreens I've talked about that have all been chemical sunscreens, the active sunscreen ingredients in this are both chemical and then you have zinc oxide. Because of that, there is a bit of a white cast. A sunscreen that only has zinc oxide or zinc plus titanium dioxide will leave a pretty noticeable cast, especially if you have a deeper skin tone. Now, of course, different formulas will have less of a cast in comparison to others, but if you get a hybrid sunscreen which has zinc plus some chemical filters, the cast tends to be even less than a strictly mineral sunscreen. In my experience, it tends to be a lot more modest. So if you have a deeper skin tone but you like zinc oxide sunscreens, try a hybrid sunscreen. It really is a great option for not having that cast. Now, this formula is nice and lightweight for a sunscreen that has zinc oxide. I say for a sunscreen that has zinc oxide because one of the reasons I really don't wear that many zinc oxide sunscreens, and when I do, they're typically hybrid sunscreens, is that mineral sunscreens, zinc, titanium dioxide, they tend to be a lot thicker, a lot heavier, and in the summer months, especially here when it's so humid, that is just like not the most pleasant. So I prefer chemical sunscreens for that reason, but I do like hybrid sunscreens as well, and they tend to be, you know, they're not as lightweight as an all chemical formula. Like, there's just no way that this is going to be as breathable as an all chemical formula, but it's a lot better than a strictly all mineral formula. So I like that. Now, all of CeraVe's products, of course, have ceramides. I mean, that's their namesake, ceramide vehicle. That's what CeraVe stands for. Ceramides are lipids that are naturally found in skin's outermost layer, and applying them topically can help with barrier function. Now, with age and with certain underlying skin conditions, ceramide levels may become compromised, decline, and so these can be really helpful ingredients for the purposes of barrier function. But ultraviolet radiation from the sun can actually damage ceramides. This does have niacinamide as well, which again, B vitamin, good for dark spots, redness, the moisture barrier. I really like niacinamide in my skincare and my products, my sunscreens. This also has hyaluronic acid, which is very hydrating, helps with the moisture content in the skin. Very nice formula. It's not super greasy. It doesn't leave the skin shiny. It's a great base for makeup. All of these pretty much are a good base for makeup, I should say, as well. None of them really pill or have any issues along those lines that some sunscreen formulas often have. Now, if you encounter pilling with a sunscreen, make sure to try it on a completely bare face. One of the reasons why, I check out my video on why your sunscreen pills, I give a lot of different reasons, but one reason is if you have a layer of, say, a moisturizer on that is particularly emollient, especially, well, the sunscreen may not get along with that oilier film, may not want to lie down on that, create a film, and that is something that can lead to pilling. So if you're someone who uses a lot of serums in the morning and you find that you get pilling with your sunscreen, you might want to, you know, rethink your morning routine and maybe just try just using sunscreen alone, because again, it is in a moisturizing base. And then last but not least is from the Vacation line of sunscreens that I reviewed over the summer. That whole brand is really popular this summer. Honestly, I have really enjoyed their SPF 30 lip balms. This is the Arizona green tea and honey lip balm. Now, it does have flavor in it. Obviously, that's the whole theme behind it. Keep in mind, fragrance slash flavor in lip balms can be a cause of lip irritation, exacerbating dryness and irritation. But for me, this did not cause that issue. This is a water-resistant SPF lip balm, water-resistant up to 80 minutes. Very moisturizing for me, very hydrating. You'll recall from my last sunscreen empties, I finished the Mango Madness Mucho Mango flavor, and this time I finished the green tea and honey. I really like these. They're a pleasure to apply. They have good glide on the lips, like they're not a stiff stick that gives you some resistance as you're trying to spread it on the lips. Definitely want to have an SPF lip balm in the winter months because lips remain a very exposed territory, both to ultraviolet radiation, but also to getting chapped from windburn. And a good moisturizing, protective SPF lip balm is going to be your best friend, especially it is a must-have if you're going to be skiing or doing any sort of winter sport around snow, or, you know, maybe not even skiing, right? Like, that's an expensive hobby. A few times I've done it, it's been like, whew, this is not a cheap thing to do. Just like shoveling snow outdoors, all that stuff that I have blanked out of my memory from my time living in places where it snows, all that stuff you have to deal with snow. Like, I do not envy you at all. Being outdoors, shoveling snow, scraping the driveway, yeah, all of that stuff. get yourself a good SPF lip balm. That was a great one, provided you're not allergic to fragrance or flavorants. All right, guys, that's a wrap up with regards to my sunscreen empties, everything I finished up throughout 2024, or at least the fall of 2024, I should say. Keep in mind, though, these are not the only sunscreens I wore. I have others in progress, which will, be completed, and you'll see them in the winter empties. But make sure you stay tuned in 2025 for the clear, colorless sunscreen gel review, because I have so many great options I'm really excited to share with you guys in that video. But if you like this one, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and as always, don't forget, sunscreen and subscribe. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Bye.